Developments tonight in an Amber Alert issued last night for a 7-month-old baby. She was abducted by a sex offender in Danville.
Tonight we learned there was a possible sighting of the two. Police initially thought the pair could be headed to Hampton Roads, but according to the latest information from state police, the suspect may have been spotted in the area of Seven Springs, North Carolina.
And that was around 6:30 this evening. Robert Boyd joins us with more.
Well, according to police, the child was abducted at a gas station in Danville, Virginia, around 8 o'clock last night. Now, earlier tonight, that abductor was possibly seen about 150 miles away in Seven Springs, North Carolina, and now it is believed he could be heading to Oak Island, North Carolina, next. The man police are looking for is 51-year-old Carl Ray Kennedy, a convicted sex offender out of North Carolina who had most recently been living in Asheboro. According to authorities, on Sunday evening, Kennedy abducted his own daughter, 7-month-old Emma Grace Kennedy. As you can see from these surveillance photos, Kennedy is accused of holding up the child's mother at knife point at a quick stop gas station in Danville, Virginia. He then kidnapped the child and fled the scene in a gold 4-door Suzuki with North Carolina tags FAA 1873. The child is believed to be in extreme danger. Kennedy is described as 5'8", 170 pounds, with tattoos on both arms. On his left arm, he has a tattoo of a skull and a wizard. On his right arm, he has a skull with a bandana over its mouth and a pit bull. He was last seen wearing a brown t-shirt and gray shorts. As for Emma, she was last seen wearing a blue onesie. She is listed as about 2'2", 18 pounds, with blonde hair and blue eyes. Now, if anyone out there has any information on this case, you're being urged to call the Danville Police Department or Virginia State Police. Robert Boyd, 13 News Now.